I am 26 years old. My wedding day was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. It was, for about 6 hours. Then my aunt decided to ruin it. Everything was perfect until the cake cutting. The venue was beautiful, filled with flowers and soft lights. My husband Mark stood beside me, his hand warm on my back. My family and friends were all there, smiling and happy for us. We had just sliced into the towering white cake, a moment I had dreamed about since I was a little girl. The photographer was capturing the smear of frosting I had just put on Mark's nose. People were laughing. It was a perfect memory in the making. Then, a voice cut through the joy like a shard of glass. It was my Aunt Sofia. She was standing near the gift table, her face a mask of theatrical horror. "The money is gone," she shrieked. The music stuttered to a halt. The laughter died in everyone's throats. Every single guest turned to stare at her. My heart hammered against my ribs. The dowry money. My parents had given it to us as a wedding gift. It was a tradition in our family, a substantial sum of cash to help a new couple start their life together. It was meant for a down payment on a house. "What are you talking about, Sophia?" my father asked, his voice tight. He started walking toward her. Aunt Sophia pointed a trembling finger, not at a stranger, but at my own brother, Leo. He was standing a few feet away from the gift table, looking utterly bewildered. "He was just here," she cried, her voice rising with manufactured panic. "I saw him. He was the only one near the table. The box is empty. The dowry money is gone." A collective gasp went through the room. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock and hurt. I looked at Leo. My brother, who had held my hand when I walked down the aisle because our father was too emotional. My brother, who had given a speech so full of love it had made me cry. Accusing him of stealing was like accusing the sun of being cold. It made no sense. All eyes were on Leo now, 100 pairs of eyes full of suspicion and confusion. The air was thick with accusation. My beautiful wedding reception had turned into a courtroom, and my brother was the one on trial. I felt a cold dread wash over me. This was a nightmare. This was a poison that would infect our family for years to come. I saw Mark's parents, my new in-laws, whispering to each other, their faces grim. My perfect day was shattering into a million pieces. Leo just stood there for a second, his face pale. The accusation hung in the air, heavy and ugly. He looked from Aunt Sophia's accusing face to my father's worried one, then to my mother's tear-filled eyes. Finally, his gaze met mine. I tried to send him a message with my eyes. "I trust you. I know you didn't do this." He seemed to understand. He took a slow breath, a small, sad motion that seemed to pull all the energy in the room toward him. Then, very deliberately, he did something strange. He lifted both of his hands, palms facing forward, showing them to everyone in the room. They were empty. He held them there, steady and open in the silent, stunned room. It was a simple gesture, but it was powerful. It was a silent declaration. I have nothing. I did not take it. The image of my brother standing there with his empty hands held up for everyone to see burned itself into my memory. He was being accused of theft at his own sister's wedding, and his only defense was his own emptiness. It was heartbreaking. It was infuriating. And in that moment, I knew Aunt Sofia had not just made a mistake. She had done this on purpose. The silence after Leo showed his hands was deafening. It stretched for what felt like an eternity. People didn't know how to react. My father finally broke the spell. "Sophia, this is outrageous," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You are accusing my son, in front of all our friends and family, of being a thief." "The money is gone, David," Aunt Sofia insisted, though her voice had lost some of its shrill confidence. She seemed a little taken aback by Leo's quiet defiance. "The box was right here. Now it's empty. He was the last one I saw near it." My mother started to cry softly. "Leo would never," she whispered to my father. "He would never do that." I looked over at Mark, my new husband. He was looking at his aunt, then at me, then at Leo, his expression unreadable. He put a hand on my arm. Alara, let's go somewhere quiet and figure this out, he murmured. He was trying to be calming, but all I felt was a surge of anger. Figure what out? My brother's innocence? There was nothing to figure out. There is nothing to figure out, I said, my voice shaking slightly. I pulled my arm away from his touch. I walked away from the half-cut cake, my wedding dress swishing around my ankles. I went straight to my brother. I stood beside him, facing our aunt. Aunt Sofia, I said, my voice much steadier now. Why were you looking in the gift box? The question surprised her. Her eyes darted around nervously. I was just checking on it to make sure it was safe. You were checking on it, I repeated slowly. By opening it? Yes, she said, lifting her chin. It's a lot of money. It's a good thing I did because now it's gone. And he, she said, pointing at Leo again, was right there. Leo finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it carried in the silent room. You told me to go over there, Aunt Sofia. Everyone turned to him. What? My father asked. Just before you screamed, Leo said, looking directly at her. You came up to me. You said, Leo, dear, could you do me a favor and just stand by the gift table for a moment? Things are getting so crowded. So I did. I walked over here. 2 minutes later, you started screaming. A new kind of silence fell over the room. A thinking silence. My aunt's story suddenly had a hole in it. A very large, very convenient hole. She had placed him there. She had set the stage. Aunt Sofia's face went pale, then red. I never said that. You're lying to cover your tracks, she sputtered. But the damage was done. The certainty in the room had shifted. Doubt was now pointing at her. I felt a small, fierce flicker of something that wasn't despair. It was resolve. She was not going to get away with this. She was not going to destroy my family. I would not let her. I looked at my brother, who still stood there, his hands now hanging loosely at his sides. He had been humiliated, but he had told the truth. Now it was my turn to find the rest of it. The party, of course, was over. Guests started to leave in awkward little groups, murmuring apologies and offering sympathetic looks. The happy, celebratory atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by something tense and sour. The catering staff began clearing away the untouched food. My beautiful wedding had been poisoned. Mark's parents came over. His father, a quiet man named George, looked deeply uncomfortable. We are so sorry about this, he said, looking at my parents. Sophia can be emotional. Emotional. That was the word he used to describe a woman who had just accused her nephew of a felony in a room full of people. My mother-in-law, Clara, just nodded, her lips pressed into a thin, unhappy line. She couldn't even look at me. She was too embarrassed. Or maybe she was angry that my family drama had just sullied her son's wedding. I couldn't tell which. Mark led me to a small side room, away from the prying eyes of the remaining guests and staff. Alara, I am so sorry, he said, taking my hands. My aunt, she has no filter. She speaks before she thinks. She didn't just speak, Mark, I said, my voice flat. She accused my brother of being a thief. She set him up. Mark sighed. He ran a hand through his hair. Set him up? Isn't that a little much? Maybe she was just confused. Panicked. I stared at him. My husband of less than a day, and he was already making excuses for her. Confused? She told Leo to stand in a specific spot and then screamed that he was a thief. How is that confusion? I don't know, he said, sounding frustrated. Look, can we just focus on finding the money? We can deal with my aunt later. If we find the money, this all goes away. It doesn't just go away, I shot back. She called Leo a thief. That doesn't get erased just because the money shows up. People heard her. Your parents heard her. I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. This was our first real conflict, and we were on opposite sides. He wanted to smooth things over. I wanted justice for my brother. I left Mark in the room and went to find Leo. He was with my parents, who were trying to comfort him. My father was angry, pacing back and forth. My mother was just sitting there, looking lost. "I'm going to find out what happened," I told them. I looked at Leo. "Come with me." We went back to the now empty reception hall. The gift table was still there, looking like a crime scene. The ornate wooden box my parents had put the money in was open and empty. It was a beautiful box, carved by my grandfather. Just seeing it violated felt like another blow. "Tell me again exactly what happened," I said to Leo. "It was just like I said," he replied, his voice tired. "I was talking to Uncle Robert. Aunt Sofia came over. She was smiling, all friendly. She said, 'Leo, be a dear and go watch the gifts for a moment.' I thought it was a weird request, but she's our aunt, so I did it. I walked over. I stood here for maybe a minute, maybe two. I was just looking around the room. Then I heard her scream. I turned around and she was pointing at me. 'Did you see her near the table before she came to get you?' I asked. He thought for a moment. 'Yes, maybe 5 minutes before. She was walking by and she kind of lingered near the table. She had her big purse with her. The giant black one she always carries.' My mind flashed with an image. I had seen her with that purse. I had even thought it was an odd choice for a wedding. It was huge, more like a piece of luggage than a handbag. 'Did you see her leave the room at any point?' 'Yes,' he said immediately. Right after she lingered by the table, she walked out of the main hall. She went down the corridor toward the restrooms. She was gone for a few minutes. Then she came back, came straight to me and told me to stand here. My brain was working fast. She lingers by the table. She leaves the room. She comes back and sets up Leo as a guard. Then she screams. It was a plan. It was deliberate. 'She hid the money,' I whispered. 'She must have taken it when she was by the table, put it in her purse, walked out and stashed it somewhere, and then came back to frame you.' 'But why?' Leo asked, looking miserable. 'Why would she do this to us? To you on your wedding day?' I thought about all the years of Aunt Sophia's quiet resentment, the backhanded compliments, the constant comparisons between me and her children. My parents had been more successful than her and my uncle. They had been able to give me and Leo more opportunities. She had always been jealous. A bitter, simmering jealousy that had finally boiled over. 'Because she's not a happy person,' I said simply, 'and she doesn't want us to be happy either.' I felt a surge of cold, hard anger. She had picked the most important day of my life to try and tear my family apart with her poison. 'What are we going to do?' Leo asked. 'We're going to prove it,' I said. I looked around the empty hall. There were security cameras in the corners of the room, little black domes on the ceiling. We're going to get the proof. I made a decision. I was no longer a bride. I was an investigator. And my first case was bringing down my own aunt. My first step was to talk to the venue manager. I found him overseeing the cleanup crew. He was a man named Mr. Henderson with a tired but professional demeanor. I put on my most distressed bride face. "Mr. Henderson," I said, my voice trembling just a little. "I'm so sorry about the commotion. It's been a terrible end to our day." "I am very sorry for your trouble, Mrs. Collins," he said, using my new last name for the first time. It sounded strange in this context. "Is there anything at all I can do?" "Actually, there is," I said. I decided not to mention the money directly. That would create a bigger problem, involving official reports and maybe even the police, which I wasn't ready for yet. In all the chaos, it seems a very personal item has gone missing from the gift table. A family heirloom. It's not about the value, it's sentimental. I let my voice crack. Mr. Henderson's expression softened. "I understand completely. We can have my staff do a thorough search of the room." "Thank you, but I was wondering," I said. lowering my voice conspiratorially. I noticed you have security cameras. Would it be at all possible to review the footage from the reception hall? Just for the hour around the cake cutting. It would give me such peace of mind to just see what happened around that table. He hesitated. Well, our policy on security footage is quite strict. We can only release it to law enforcement. My heart sank. Oh, I said, trying to look crushed. I understand. It's just, my grandmother gave it to me. She passed away last year. This is just devastating. I was laying it on thick, but I was desperate. He looked at me, then at the sad, empty hall. He sighed. Look, I'm not supposed to do this, but it's your wedding night. I'll tell you what. I can't give you a copy, but I can let you and your brother view the footage in my office. Right now. Will that help? Yes, I said, feeling a rush of gratitude. Thank you. Thank you so much. He led me and Leo to a small, cluttered office behind the main reception area. He sat down at a computer and pulled up the security feed. There were several angles. He found the one that covered the gift table. Here we are, he said. The timestamp is in the corner. When should I look? Around 9 p.m., I said, just before the cake cutting. He fast-forwarded the video. We watched the guests mingling. Then I saw her, Aunt Sofia, walking toward the gift table. Just as Leo had said, she had the enormous black purse slung over her shoulder. She slowed down, her back mostly to the camera. She seemed to be adjusting something on the table. Her body blocked the view of the gift box for about 30 seconds. It was impossible to see what she was doing with her hands. There, I whispered, pointing at the screen. That's my aunt. She then turned and walked away from the table, heading for the exit corridor. Can we follow her? I asked. Is there a camera in the hallway? Mr. Henderson switched to another camera feed. It showed the long corridor that led to the restrooms and the building's side exit. We saw Aunt Sofia walk down the hall. She didn't go into the women's restroom. Instead, she paused near the fire exit. She looked back down the hall toward the reception. Then she quickly opened her purse. We couldn't see inside it, but we saw her rummage around for a moment. Then she pushed open the fire exit door and slipped outside. She went outside, Leo said, his voice tight. How long was she out there? I asked. Mr. Henderson kept the video playing. Less than a minute later, the door opened again and she came back in. Her purse looked noticeably flatter. She smoothed her dress, took a deep breath, and then walked back into the reception hall with a calm expression on her face. And then she came to get me, Leo said, his voice full of dawning horror. She stashed it, I said. She took the money, put it in her purse, went out the side door and hid it somewhere, then came back in to start her drama. We had it. It wasn't perfect. She was careful to keep her back to the camera at the table, but the sequence of events was incredibly damning. She was the only one who went near the table, then immediately left the room through a side exit and came back visibly less burdened. Then she started screaming. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice firm now. My aunt accused my brother of stealing. This footage shows she is the one who was acting suspiciously. Can I please have a copy of this? He looked from the screen to my face. He saw the determination there. He chewed on his lip for a moment. As I said, I cannot give you a copy without a police report, he said slowly. However, the system automatically saves all footage for 30 days. If you were to file a report tomorrow, the evidence would be right here, waiting for the authorities. He gave me a look that was full of meaning. He was telling me how to do this by the book. Thank you, I said again. You've been more helpful than you know. We left his office, my mind racing. We had the path. We had the proof. Now I had to decide what to do with it. My first instinct was to go to my parents, to Mark, and show them what I had found, to vindicate Leo and expose Sofia. But then I hesitated. If I showed them the footage, what would happen? My parents would be heartbroken. Mark would be caught between me and his family. It would cause a war. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I couldn't just drop this bomb. I needed to disarm it carefully. I needed to confront Sofia directly. But I needed to do it in a way that gave her no escape. I turned to Leo. "We're not telling anyone about this yet," I said. "Not Mom and Dad. Not Mark. No one." "What?" "Why?" he asked, confused. "This proves I'm innocent." "I know," I said. "But if we just show this to everyone, it will be her word against a grainy video. She'll say she was just adjusting her dress, or that she went outside for fresh air. She will lie. She will make everyone confused. We need more than this. We need something she can't deny." "Like what?" he asked. "Like catching her with the money," I said. "She hid it somewhere outside that fire exit. We need to figure out where." A new plan was forming in my mind, a much riskier one. We weren't just going to prove Leo's innocence. We were going to set a trap for Aunt Sofia. Mark found me a few minutes later. I had composed myself, tucking the cold anger away behind a mask of weary sadness. "Ilara, where did you go?" he asked. "My parents are leaving. They want to say goodnight." I nodded and walked with him to say our farewells. His mother, Clara, gave me a stiff, awkward hug. "I hope things get sorted out," she said. It wasn't an apology. It was a dismissal. A hope that this unpleasantness would simply vanish. His father just patted my shoulder, his face still grim. I could feel the chasm between our families widening with every passing minute. After they left, Mark turned to me. "My dad thinks we should call the police," he said. "File a report for the stolen money." "No," I said immediately. "I don't want the police involved, not yet. It would just make everything a bigger mess." "But Ilara, a crime was committed," he argued. "A lot of money was stolen. What if it was one of the venue staff? Or a guest we don't know? We can't just let it go." He was trying to find another explanation. Any explanation that didn't involve his aunt. He was grasping at straws to avoid the ugly truth. "It wasn't a stranger, Mark," I said quietly. "You don't know that," he insisted. "You're just so focused on my aunt because you don't like her." The accusation stung. It stung because it was so unfair. I'm focused on her because she's the one who screamed. She's the one who accused my brother. She's the one Leo saw leaving the room right before it happened. "Leo saw her leave the room?" "So what?" Mark said, his voice rising. "People leave rooms all the time at parties. It doesn't mean they're thieves. You're building this whole conspiracy theory based on nothing but your own feelings." I feel a flash of hot anger. My feelings? I am not a hysterical woman. I am a logical person who has just seen evidence. But I can't tell him that. Not yet. It would be a mistake. "Mark, this is my brother she accused," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "My family. Can you please, just for a moment, try to see this from my side? Your aunt humiliated my brother in front of 100 people on our wedding day." "And I'm sorry for that," he said, throwing his hands up in the air. "I've said I'm sorry a dozen times. What do you want me to do? Go yell at her? Disown her? It's not going to get the money back." "I don't care about the money right now," I said. And I realized it was the absolute truth. The money was secondary. "I care about the lie. She lied, Mark, and you're defending her." "I'm not defending her," he protested. "I'm just saying we don't have any proof. It's your word against hers. It's Leo's word against hers." This is where he is wrong. I have more than words. I have proof. The thought gave me a sliver of strength. He thinks I have nothing. He is underestimating me. This gives me an advantage. "Fine," I said, my voice cold. "If you want to believe your aunt is just an emotional person who panicked, you can do that. But I know what I saw, and I know my brother, and I am going to fix this." "How?" he challenged. "You'll see," I said. I turned and walked away from him, leaving him standing alone in the middle of the empty dance floor. Our first night as husband and wife, and we were already miles apart. I knew then that clearing Leo's name was only half the battle. The other half would be figuring out if my new marriage could even survive this. I went to find my parents. They were getting ready to leave, their faces etched with worry. "We're going home," my father said. "This has been a disaster." "I'm coming with you," I said. "What about Mark?" my mother asked, her eyes darting toward where he was still standing. "Mark can go home to his own apartment tonight," I said. "I'm staying with you. I need to be with my family." It was a statement, a line in the sand. Tonight I was a daughter and a sister first, a wife second. My parents didn't question it. They just nodded and we left together. The car ride to my parents' house was silent. When we got inside, my father finally spoke. "What do we do, Alara? Your aunt has poisoned everything." "We expose her," I said simply. "How?" my mother asked, her voice fragile. "It's our word against hers. She's my sister. How can I—" Her voice trailed off. She was caught between her sister and her son. It was a terrible position, and it was exactly where Sofia wanted her. "Leo," I said, turning to my brother. "Tomorrow morning, you and I are going back to the venue. Early." "Why?" he asked. "Aunt Sofia went out the side fire exit," I explained. "She hid the money somewhere out there, in the dark. She'll have to go back for it, and she'll probably do it first thing in the morning before anyone is around. We're going to be there when she does." A flicker of hope appeared in Leo's eyes. "You think we can catch her?" "I think we can," I said. "We just need to be smart about it." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in my childhood bed, the frilly comforter feeling alien after so many years. My wedding dress was hanging on the back of the door, a white ghost in the darkness. I should have been with my husband. I should have been happy. Instead, I was plotting. I was filled with a cold, clear purpose. Aunt Sofia had started a war. She just didn't realize I was the kind of person who would finish it. The next morning, Leo and I were up before the sun. We dressed in dark, inconspicuous clothes. I felt like a spy in a movie. It was absurd but necessary. We drove back to the wedding venue in Leo's car, parking across the street where we had a clear view of the side of the building and the fire exit Aunt Sofia had used. "What if she doesn't come?" Leo asked, his voice tight with nerves. We were sitting in the quiet car, the engine off, watching the empty street. "She'll come," I said with more confidence than I felt. "She's not going to leave that much money just sitting there. She's arrogant. She thinks she got away with it. She thinks everyone is focused on you." We waited. An hour passed. The sun began to rise, casting a gray light over the city. Street sweepers went by. A few early morning joggers passed. Then, just as I was starting to lose hope, a familiar car turned the corner. It was my uncle's car, a dark blue sedan, and Aunt Sofia was in the driver's seat. "There she is," I whispered, my heart starting to pound. "Get your phone ready, record this." Leo fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking slightly. "Okay, I'm ready." Aunt Sofia parked her car a little way down the street. She got out, looking around nervously. She was wearing a tracksuit and a baseball cap, trying to look like she was just out for a morning walk. But her eyes kept darting toward the fire exit. She walked casually down the sidewalk, past the door. Then she glanced around one more time, saw the street was empty, and quickly ducked into the alleyway where the door was located. "She's going for it," Leo said. "Stay here," I told him. "Keep recording. I'm going to get a closer look." Before he could protest, I slipped out of the car. I crept along the side of the building, staying in the shadows. I peered around the corner of the alley. I could see her. She was kneeling down next to a large potted plant by the fire exit. She reached behind it, her arm disappearing into the thick foliage. When she pulled her hand back, she was holding a large, sealed plastic bag. It was bulging. It was the money. I had her. She stood up, a triumphant little smirk on her face. She thought she had won. She clutched the bag to her chest and turned to leave the alley. That's when I stepped out from behind the corner. "Looking for this, Aunt Sofia?" I asked. Her head snapped up. The smirk vanished from her face, replaced by pure, unadulterated shock. She froze, her eyes wide with terror. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights, clutching her stolen prize. "Alara," she stammered. What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I said, my voice dangerously calm. I took a step closer. "But I think I already know the answer. That's my wedding money, isn't it?" She clutched the bag tighter. Her mind was racing, trying to find a lie. "No, this is something else. This is mine." "Really?" I said, raising an eyebrow. "What is it then? Your life savings? In a plastic bag hidden behind a pot outside a wedding venue?" She started to back away. "You have no proof. You saw nothing." "Oh, I have proof," I said. I nodded my head toward the street. Leo is sitting in his car right now, recording this entire conversation. He also has the security footage from inside the venue, the footage of you lurking by the gift table, the footage of you sneaking out this very door right after you took the money, the footage of you coming back inside, empty-handed, right before you decided to accuse my brother of being a thief. Every word I spoke seemed to land like a physical blow. The color drained from her face. She looked toward the street and saw Leo in the car, his phone pointed directly at us. She was trapped. Completely and utterly trapped. "You wouldn't," she whispered, her voice pleading now. "You wouldn't show that to your parents, to the family. It would destroy your mother." "You should have thought about my mother before you decided to frame her son," I retorted, my anger finally breaking through my calm facade. "You should have thought about my wedding day before you decided to light a match and burn it all down. You did this, not me." She looked down at the bag in her hands, then back at me. The fight went out of her. Her shoulders slumped in defeat. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I want two things," I said, stepping even closer until I was standing right in front of her. "First, I want every single penny of that money back. Right now." I held out my hand. She hesitated for a moment, then reluctantly handed me the heavy plastic bag. I didn't even look inside. I knew it was all there. "Second," I continued, my voice dropping to a low, intense level. "You are going to apologize. Not just to me. You are going to call a family meeting. My parents, your husband, Mark, his parents. Everyone who heard your disgusting accusation. And you are going to stand in front of all of them and you are going to tell them that you lied. You are going to tell them that you stole the money and you tried to frame Leo. You are going to clear my brother's name, completely and publicly." She stared at me, her eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and despair. "You can't make me do that," she said weakly. "I can and I will," I said. "Because if you don't, I will take the video from last night and the video from this morning, and I will send it to every single person in our family. I will post it on social media. I will make sure that every person you know sees you for the jealous, manipulative thief that you are. And then I will go to the police and I will press charges." "Is that what you want, Aunt Sofia? To be publicly shamed and then arrested?" The threat hung in the air between us. She knew I meant it. She could see it in my eyes. I was not the sweet, quiet niece she had always known. She had pushed me too far. She had created this version of me. Tears of self-pity started to well up in her eyes. "You're cruel, Alara." "No," I said, my voice like ice. "I'm just finishing what you started. You have until noon to schedule that meeting. Don't test me." I turned my back on her without another word. I walked away, clutching the bag of money, and got back into the car with Leo. He was staring at me, his mouth slightly open. "That was amazing," he said. I just nodded, my heart still pounding with adrenaline. I looked at the bag of money in my lap. It felt heavy. It was more than just cash. It was victory. It was justice. And it was the weapon I was going to use to heal the wound my aunt had tried to inflict on my family. The war wasn't over yet, but I had just won the most important battle. When I got back to my parents' house, the bag of money in my hand, they were sitting at the kitchen table, looking exhausted. My father was staring into a cold cup of coffee. My mother's eyes were red and swollen. I walked in and placed the bag on the table with a soft thud. They both looked up, startled. "What is that?" my father asked. "It's the dowry money," I said simply. My mother gasped. "Where did you find it?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "Aunt Sofia led me right to it," I said. I quickly recounted the morning's events, the stakeout, catching her red-handed in the alley, her pathetic attempt to lie her way out of it. As I spoke, I saw the sadness on my parents' faces morph into a slow-burning anger. "She admitted it?" my father asked, his voice dangerously low. "She admitted to framing Leo?" "She didn't have a choice," I replied. "Leo recorded the whole thing." My mother started to cry again, but these were different tears. They weren't tears of hurt and confusion. They were tears of anger and betrayal. "My own sister," she whispered. "How could she do this to us? To her own nephew?" "She is no sister of yours," my father said, his jaw tight. "Not anymore." "I told her she has until noon to call a family meeting," I said. "She's going to confess to everyone. She's going to apologize to Leo in front of the whole family." My father nodded, his eyes hard. "Good. She needs to be held accountable. Publicly." Just then my phone rang. It was Mark. I had been avoiding his calls all morning. I hesitated, then answered it. "Hello," I said, my voice cool. "Elara, where are you?" he asked, his voice a mix of frustration and worry. "I woke up and you were gone. Your parents said you left with Leo. What is going on?" "I've been busy," I said. "I found the money." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. "You what?" "Where was it? Was it the venue staff?" "No, Mark," I said, my patience wearing thin. "It was exactly where I knew it would be, with your aunt." I heard him take a sharp breath. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I caught your Aunt Sofia this morning retrieving the money from where she hid it outside the venue," I said, my voice like steel. "I have the money, and I have her confession on video." He was silent for a long moment. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, his denial fighting against the undeniable truth I had just presented. I don't believe it," he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You don't have to believe it," I said, "but you do have to be here. Aunt Sofia is going to be calling a family meeting for this afternoon, at my parents' house. Your parents need to be here too. She has a confession to make." "Elara, this is insane," he said. "You're tearing our families apart." "I am not the one tearing our families apart," I snapped, my control finally breaking. "Your aunt did that when she decided to steal from my parents and frame my brother. I am the one cleaning up her mess. The only question is, whose side are you on, Mark? Are you on the side of the truth? Or are you going to keep defending a woman who has now been proven to be a liar and a thief?" I didn't wait for his answer. I was too angry. "The meeting is this afternoon. Be here," I said, and I hung up the phone. I sank into a chair at the table, my head in my hands. This was so much harder than I had imagined. It wasn't just about exposing Sofia. It was about navigating the fallout. And the biggest piece of fallout was my own husband. Around 11 o'clock, my mother's phone rang. It was Aunt Sofia. Her voice was meek and shaky. She agreed to a meeting at 3 p.m. at our house. She said she would tell her husband and Mark's parents to be there. The trap was set. The next few hours were the longest of my life. My house felt like a pressure cooker. My dad paced the living room, silent and furious. My mom busied herself cleaning things that were already clean, her hands trembling. Leo sat quietly in a corner, looking both vindicated and sad. I just sat, waiting. I felt numb. At 3 o'clock sharp, the doorbell rang. It was my Uncle John, Sophia's husband. He looked confused and worried. Sophia said we had to be here, he said. She was crying. She wouldn't tell me why. A few minutes later, Mark arrived with his parents. His face was a thundercloud. His parents just looked grim and exhausted. They all gathered in the living room, the silence thick and uncomfortable. Finally, Aunt Sofia arrived. She walked in like a prisoner on her way to the gallows. She wouldn't look anyone in the eye. My father stood in the center of the room. Sophia, he said, his voice cold and formal. You have something to say. All eyes turned to her. She stood there wringing her hands, her face pale and blotchy. She looked at my mother, her eyes pleading. Anna, she began, her voice cracking. Don't talk to me, my mother said, turning her face away. Talk to my son. Sophia flinched. She slowly turned to face Leo. He was standing next to me, his expression unreadable. She took a deep, shuddering breath. Leo, she whispered, I am so sorry. Sorry for what, Sophia? My father demanded. Say it. Say what you did. She started to cry. I lied, she choked out. At the wedding, I lied. You didn't take the money, I did. A gasp went through the room. Her husband, John, stared at her in horror. Sophia? What are you talking about? I took it, she sobbed, the words tumbling out now. I took the money from the gift box. I hid it. And I said Leo did it. I'm so sorry, Leo. I'm so sorry. Leo just stood there, his face like stone. He didn't say a word. Why? Uncle John asked, his voice shaking with disbelief and shame. Why would you do that? Sophia just shook her head, sobbing uncontrollably. She couldn't give an answer. Or maybe she was just too ashamed to admit the real reason. The jealousy, the bitterness, the resentment she had harbored for years. It's not just that she stole the money and framed my son, I said, my voice cutting through her sobs. Everyone looked at me. There's more. I paused, letting the tension build. Sophia's head snapped up, her eyes wide with a new kind of fear. She thought her confession was the end of it. She was wrong. The money wasn't the only thing in that box, I said, looking around the room at the confused faces. There was also a gift from my grandmother, a diamond necklace. It was a family heirloom meant for me to wear on my wedding day. And it's gone too. Uncle John looked even more confused. What does that have to do with anything? Because your wife didn't just steal the cash for herself, I said, my eyes locking onto Sophia's. She stole the necklace for your son. A new shockwave went through the room. I turned my attention to Mark. Your cousin Marco has a gambling problem, doesn't he, Mark? Mark paled. He looked at me, then at his aunt, then at the floor. He didn't answer. He does, I continued, answering my own question. He owes a lot of money to some very dangerous people, and he was getting desperate. Isn't that right, Aunt Sofia? You didn't just want to hurt my family. You wanted to bail out your son. So you stole my grandmother's necklace to pay off his debts, and you created a loud, public scene about the missing cash to distract everyone from what you had really taken. Sophia stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She had no words. I had laid her entire, sordid plan bare for everyone to see. It was no longer a simple act of theft born of panic. It was a cold, calculated plot to sacrifice my brother's reputation to save her own son. Uncle John looked like he had been punched in the gut. He sank onto the sofa, his face ashen. Sophia? Is this true? She couldn't speak. She just nodded, her body racked with pathetic sobs. The confession hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. The room was silent except for Sophia's weeping. My Uncle John looked like a broken man. He just stared at his wife, his face a mixture of fury and profound disappointment. Mark's parents, Clara and George, looked utterly mortified. Their faces were flushed with shame. This was their family, their sister who had done this. "So not only did you steal from us," my father said, his voice shaking with restrained rage, "you used our daughter's wedding gift, a piece of our family's history, to pay off your son's gambling debts." "I didn't know what else to do," Sophia wailed. "He was in so much trouble. They were threatening him." "So you decided to threaten my son's future instead?" My mother shot back, her voice dripping with contempt. "You decided to ruin my daughter's wedding? You thought that was a better option?" Sophia had no answer. She just cried harder. I looked at Mark. He was standing by the fireplace, his arms crossed, staring at the floor. He hadn't said a single word since I revealed the part about the necklace. He hadn't defended his aunt. He hadn't defended his cousin. He was just silent. And his silence was the loudest thing in the room. It was the sound of a man who knew he had backed the wrong horse, who knew he had failed a critical test. Finally, Uncle John stood up. He walked over to his wife and took her by the arm, his grip firm. "We are leaving," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He looked at my parents. "David, Anna, I have no words. I am so deeply, deeply ashamed. We will get the necklace back. I swear to you. Whatever it takes, we will make this right." "There is no making this right, John," my father said quietly. "The trust is gone. It's gone forever." Uncle John just nodded, his eyes filled with sorrow. He pulled Sophia, who was still sobbing, toward the door. As they left, a piece of our family broke off and fell away. The wound was deep, and I knew it would never fully heal. After they were gone, Mark's parents came over to my mother and father. "We are so sorry," George said, his voice hoarse. "We had no idea. We are horrified." "This is not your fault," my mother said, though her voice was weary. Clara, who had been so stiff and cold the night before, looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "Alara," she said, "you were right. We should have listened to you. We should have trusted you. I am so sorry." I just nodded. Her apology felt hollow. It came too late. It came only after the proof was undeniable. They left soon after, leaving just me, Mark, Leo, and my parents in the quiet, heavy living room. The truth was out. Leo's name was cleared, but nothing felt victorious. It just felt sad. Finally, Mark came over to me. He reached out to take my hand, but I pulled it away. "Alara," he said, his voice low. "I'm sorry." "Sorry for what, Mark?" I asked, my voice tired. "Are you sorry your aunt is a thief? Or are you sorry you didn't believe me?" "Both," he said, his eyes pleading. "I was wrong. I was so wrong. I should have been on your side from the very beginning. I let my family loyalty blind me. I saw you were hurting and I didn't support you. I defended her. I can't forgive myself for that." He sounded sincere. He looked sincere. But the hurt was still there, a fresh wound in my heart. "You didn't just not support me, Mark," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You accused me of building a conspiracy theory. You dismissed my feelings. You made me feel like I was crazy for suspecting the very person who was guilty. On our wedding night." Tears welled up in his eyes. "I know. It was unforgivable." "Yes," I said. "It was." We stood there in the silence, the space between us feeling like a vast canyon. He was my husband. I had vowed to love and honor him just yesterday. But in that moment, I felt like I was looking at a stranger who had chosen his family of origin over the new family we were supposed to be building together. "I need some time, Mark," I said finally. I can't just go back to our apartment and pretend this didn't happen. I need some space." He flinched as if I had struck him. "What does that mean? Are you leaving me?" The panic in his voice was real. "I don't know what it means," I said honestly. It means I'm staying here with my family, with the people who trusted me. It means you need to go home and think, really think about what happened, about what kind of husband you want to be. Because the husband you were last night, that's not a man I can build a life with. He just stared at me, his face crumbling. He didn't argue. He didn't protest. He just gave a small, defeated nod. He knew I was right. He turned and walked out of the house, closing the door softly behind him. I was alone with my family again. The crisis was over, but a new, more personal one was just beginning. In the days that followed, a fragile new normal began to take shape. My parents and I talked for hours. My mother mourned the loss of her sister, the sister she thought she knew. My father's anger slowly cooled into a hard, protective shell around our family. He made it clear that Sofia and her family were no longer welcome in our lives. The line had been drawn in permanent ink. Leo was quiet, but I could see the relief in his eyes. The cloud of suspicion was gone. He came to me one evening while I was sitting on the back porch. "Thank you, Alara," he said, sitting down next to me. "You didn't have to do all that. You could have just let it go." "I was never going to let it go," I said, looking out at the yard. "She came after you. She came after our family. There was no other choice." "You saved me," he said quietly. "We saved each other," I replied. "You told the truth, even when it was hard. You trusted me. That's what family does." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, our bond stronger than it had ever been. Uncle John was true to his word. A week after the disastrous confession, he called my father. He had sold his car and used the money to buy back my grandmother's necklace from the loan shark Marco had given it to. He came to the house alone to return it. He handed the velvet box to my father, his eyes downcast. "I've also enrolled Marco in a residential treatment program for his gambling addiction," he said, his voice heavy. "It's long overdue. As for Sofia, she is staying with her mother. I don't know what the future holds for us, but I needed you to know how sorry I am." My father took the box. "Thank you for returning this, John," he said, his tone formal but not unkind. "I hope your son gets the help he needs." It was an acknowledgement of his effort, but not an offer of forgiveness. Some things were too broken to be fixed. That night, my mother gave the necklace to me. I opened the box and looked at the diamonds sparkling against the black velvet. They were beautiful, but they felt tainted. They were a reminder of the ugliness, the betrayal. I closed the box and put it away in a drawer. I wasn't ready to wear it yet. Mark, for his part, was trying. He called me every day. He didn't push. He didn't demand. He just asked how I was. He told me he missed me. He sent me a long, handwritten letter pouring out his heart. He wrote about his fear of conflict, his tendency to want to smooth things over instead of facing hard truths. He wrote about how he had always seen his Aunt Sofia as a dramatic but harmless figure, and how his mind couldn't accept the possibility that she was capable of such cruelty. "It's not an excuse," he wrote. "It's an explanation for my own failure. I failed you, Alara. I failed our marriage on its very first day. I promise you, if you give me another chance, I will spend the rest of my life proving that I am on your team. Always." I read the letter over and over. I showed it to my friend, Chloe, who I had finally called and told everything to. She listened patiently, then said, "He gets it. He knows he messed up. The question is, do you believe he can change?" That was the million-dollar question. Did I believe he could change? After 2 weeks of living at my parents' house, I agreed to meet him. We met at a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop. He looked tired. He had lost weight. When I walked in, he stood up, his eyes full of a desperate hope that was painful to see. "Hi," I said, sitting down. "Hi," he replied. "Thank you for coming." We ordered coffee, making small talk with the barista. The silence that followed was awkward. I meant everything I said in my letter. he said finally, breaking the tension. I know, I said. I read it. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he continued, leaning forward. About my family, about how I was raised. We never dealt with problems head on. We swept everything under the rug. My aunt's drama, my cousin's issues. It was always easier to pretend it wasn't happening. When she did what she did at the wedding, I fell back into that old pattern. I just wanted the problem to go away. I didn't stop to think about what was right. He looked me straight in the eye. That's not an excuse. It's a flaw. In me, and it's one I need to fix. I started looking for a therapist, for myself, and I was hoping you would consider going to counseling with me. Together. I listened to him, really listened. He wasn't just apologizing. He was analyzing his own behavior. He was taking ownership of his failure. He was proposing a concrete plan of action. He wasn't just saying he would change. He was taking the steps to actually do it. I thought about my wedding day, the joy of the first few hours, the man I had married, the man who had made me laugh and feel safe. He was still in there, somewhere, underneath the fear and the flawed family dynamics. Okay, I said quietly. His head snapped up. Okay? Okay, I repeated, a little stronger this time. I will go to counseling with you. But Mark, you have to understand. This isn't a quick fix. The trust is broken. It's going to take a long, long time to rebuild it. And you have to be patient with me. Relief washed over his face, so potent it was almost tangible. I will be, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'll do whatever it takes. Thank you, Alara. Thank you. I didn't move back in with him right away. We started counseling, both individually and together. The sessions were hard. We dug into uncomfortable truths. I talked about the betrayal I felt, not just from Sofia, but from him. He talked about his guilt and his fear. We learned to communicate in a new way without accusations or defenses. We learned to listen. Slowly, painstakingly, we began to rebuild. He showed me, through his actions, that he was serious. When his mother called and tried to suggest that maybe it was time to forgive and forget for the sake of the family, he shut her down immediately. Mom, he said, with me listening on speakerphone. What Sofia did was unforgivable. Alara and I are dealing with the damage in our own way. Please don't bring it up again. It was a small moment, but it was huge. He was drawing a boundary. He was choosing me. A few months later, on what would have been my grandmother's birthday, I took the diamond necklace out of its drawer. I fastened it around my neck. The diamonds felt cool against my skin. They no longer felt tainted. They felt like a symbol of resilience, a symbol of a battle won. I went to find Mark. He was reading in the living room of our apartment. I had moved back in a few weeks prior. He looked up as I entered, and his eyes went to the necklace. A sad, knowing smile touched his lips. It's beautiful, he said. Yes, I said. It is. I knew our story would always have this scar on it. The memory of the ruined wedding, the accusation, the betrayal. It would never go away completely. But we were healing. We were building something new on the rubble of what had been broken. Something stronger, more honest. Aunt Sofia became a ghost in our family, a name that was never spoken. I heard through the grapevine that she and Uncle John had separated. She had lost her husband, her sister, her nephew, and her niece, all because of a bitterness she had allowed to fester in her heart for years. She had tried to ruin my life, to make me small and powerless on my happiest day. But she had failed. In the end, the only life she had truly ruined was her own. She had shown everyone exactly how small and powerless she was, and that was a lesson she would have to live with for the rest of her days. I stopped waiting for apologies I would never get. I stopped giving warnings to people who would never listen. I learned that sometimes the most satisfying justice isn't about revenge. It's about surviving, healing, and building a better life in spite of the people who tried to tear it down. And as I looked at my reflection, the diamonds of my grandmother's necklace sparkling at my throat, I knew I had done just that. I was a survivor. And I was finally, truly, happy.